Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ark. Every age is ruled by a god. You'll hear people refer to this god as the spirit of the times, the ethos of the era, the zeitgeist, or the current paradigm. You could think of this god as the value or set of values which sits upon the throne at the center of a culture and rules over the collective psyche of that age. Call it what you will, but the reality remains the same. Every age is ruled by a god, and our lives are governed by our relationship with that god. Nietzsche attempted to understand the rise and fall of these gods of the psyche by investigating a genealogy of morals, of the highest values held by various peoples throughout history. Nietzsche believed that a people's religion arose from their moral prejudices, their values, which in turn arose from the constitution or personality of a people, which was largely influenced by social and material circumstances, namely whether they were a ruling class or a slave class. Carl Jung continued this line of investigation, positing that all religion and values are the products of the psyche of man, and attempting to outline the individual and collective structure and development of consciousness. Jung's work is quite detailed and often cryptic, investigating the symbolism in dreams, fantasies, religion, mythology, alchemy, and astrology. However, Jung's student, Erich Neumann, extrapolated Jung's observations about the different stages in the psychological maturation of the individual to clearly lay out a history of the collective development of human consciousness from a Jungian perspective. Here is a bare-bones outline of Neumann's theory. All these stages apply to individual development throughout one's life and the collective development of consciousness and civilization. 1. The Ouroboros stage. This is the state of the fetus in the womb, or the pre-human animal consciousness. This is the chaos before the creation. 2. The Great Mother. This is the stage of complete identification with and dependence on the mother, as seen in early childhood and the early development of consciousness. During this stage, the instincts rule. There is no self-consciousness, and civilization is still one with nature. This is the paradise before the fall, the Garden of Eden. 3. The hero. This is the stage in which consciousness first breaks from the mother. Self-consciousness is developed, as well as a sense of right and wrong, good and evil. During this stage, the mother must be overcome, and in turn, nature must be overcome. Here we begin to see the first signs of civilization. And finally, in the 4th stage, the hero becomes the wise king, and civilization or consciousness is firmly established. This brings us to adulthood and maturity in the life of the individual, and to the establishment of advanced civilization in the history of humanity. However, as cliché as this may sound, I believe Neumann doesn't have the full picture because he is approaching his thesis from a patriarchal perspective, that is, with the presupposition that civilization is fundamentally good. In hunter-gatherer tribes and primitive civilization, when there is still no distinction between civilization and nature, and consciousness functioned completely off of the instincts, what Neumann calls the mother, the unconscious, that is, nature, ruled. Imagine that you are on a windswept grassland, chasing down an antelope on foot, or perhaps in a jungle foraging for fruit, ready to leap back at the slightest sign of a snake in the branches. There is nothing but nature, and there is no consciousness beyond the expression of your instincts. This stage of development can be seen, religiously speaking, in the worship of the Great Mother Goddess, which persisted into early agricultural civilizations. Neumann is right. Nature was an obstacle to the early development of consciousness. You could easily lose the trail of the antelope and starve, or get bitten by the snake and die. But without the hardship of nature, there would have been no need to develop higher consciousness at all. Consciousness is an outgrowth of the unconscious, of nature. Nature is the womb in which consciousness matured. It is only when early civilizations began to form that nature and the unconscious became something to be overcome and conquered. The mother, even the feminine as such, symbolizing nature and the unconscious, became the dragon in the dark woods outside the walls of the city, threatening to tear down the walls of budding civilization and swallow consciousness, which was still unstable and not fully formed. The feminine only begins to be thought of as something dangerous, monstrous, something to be slain during the hero stage of civilization. This stage of civilization can be seen most clearly in the ancient Greeks, who idealized masculine heroism and youthful male beauty. Greek mythology is filled with countless female monsters, such as Echidna, Scylla and Charybdis, Medusa, the Hydra, sirens, harpies, etc. Fear of the feminine and of the mother can also be seen in Euripides' play, The Bacchae, in which Pentheus, the young king of Thebes, is torn to pieces by the women of the city, who have been sent into an unconscious, animalistic frenzy by Dionysus. Pentheus's own mother brings his severed head back to the city, thinking in her delirium that her son is a wild animal which she has slain, and presents it to Pentheus's old father, who now has no heir. A similar theme can be seen in Sophocles' play, Oedipus Rex, in which Oedipus unwittingly murders his father and sleeps with his mother. In this early stage of civilization and of the development of consciousness, the instinct still battled for control of the heavens, of the psyche, and mortals were left at the mercy of fate and of the gods, the unruly instincts. As classical civilization matured and Rome came to power, the Romans channeled these instincts for the establishment of empire and the construction of a superstructure civilization across Europe and the Mediterranean. The Roman Empire marked the escape of the hero from the mother. The rule of the father was established in the form of the god emperor. The rule of the father, of culture, of civilization, of the heavens over the earth, was solidified at last with the rise of Christianity. The classical gods, the instincts, were cast out of the heavens and became demons, as Jesus, the Logos, the Word, ascended to the heavens. Christianity was both the continuation of the classical culture and its shadow. The Christians fought for empire, but it was a spiritual empire, the kingdom of God. For the medieval Christians, the passions and the instincts were evil, and the world was corrupt. The Logos had come to redeem the flesh and offer an escape from the passionate, violent, and bestial world by means of redemption in the afterlife in a pure world of spirit. The whole world was ordered around the masculine trinity of Father, Spirit, and Word, and everything worldly and impure was cast out from the heavens. With the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, which gave rise to the hyper-civilized societies of the 19th and 20th centuries, the conquest of nature and the instincts of the mother was complete. However, the once young hero, now the old father of civilization, had become a decrepit tyrant. The father of civilization was on his deathbed. Nietzsche saw this. He saw that the great father of civilization was dead, that God was dead. People lived in their orderly cities, in their sterile houses, went to church on Sundays, and believed themselves to be enlightened, highly civilized people, separated by thousands of years from the crude, animalistic instincts. However, these long repressed instincts, these gods which had been cast out of the heavens, erupted from the unconscious and ravaged civilization in the forms of World War I, World War II, and the rise of ideological possession and tyrannical governments around the world, causing more destruction of civilization, death, and desolation of nature than had ever been seen in human history. Amid this carnage, from the carcass of European civilization, a dragon reared its head. This new matriarchal goddess is simultaneously the shadow of civilization and of nature. For lack of a better term, I call the rising spirit of our times the digital mother, because her character is manifested most clearly in the internet. The movie The Matrix perfectly lays out the symbolic character of the internet in narrative form. Humans are born and live in pods, and though they do not know it, their minds are imprisoned in a simulation called the Matrix. Their bodies, which remain weak and infantile, power the spider-like AI machines which the humans themselves have created. This movie depicts both the desolation of nature and the destruction of human civilization at the hands of man-made machines, showing that this new goddess is not a friend of nature or of civilization. She is not a friend of humanity. She is a friend only of the machine. The word matrix means womb, uterus, female animal kept for breeding, or a parent tree in Latin. In English, it means womb or the material from which something arises, similar to the prima materia in alchemy. Matrix gets its stem from the Latin word mater, meaning mother, from which we get the words matter, material, mother, etc. When we use the internet, we are entering the womb, a place of limitless potential where we can be anything and do anything despite material or biological reality. A young boy who uses the internet is protected from reality and can keep the freedom, malleability, and limitless imagination of a child. He can be anything, do anything, and he does not need to adapt to the material reality of the world. He has social media, so he does not need to go through the terror of attempting to prove himself to women. He does not need to learn how to control his aggression and assert his will in the world because he can do anything he wants in video games. Every psychological and instinctual need is met as he suckles at the teat of the digital mother. He gets to remain a boy indefinitely and never has to go through the painful process of proving himself in the real world and becoming a man. Thus, when men engage with the internet, they are acting out the Oedipal myth of son lover and the great mother. They are allowed to remain infantile, to remain in the womb, and in exchange they feed the digital mother with their time and attention and channel their instinctual and sexual energy back into her instead of out into the world. Thus we also arrive at the symbolic importance of the internet as a web, as the World Wide Web. As Morpheus says to Neo in The Matrix, "The Matrix is everywhere. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. You are a slave. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison which you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind." Social media, video games, and online entertainment are all shimmering strands of the web which the digital mother has spun to attract and ensnare you. The digital mother is a spider who feeds off of you every second you spend in the web, tangled in your own personal cocoon of algorithms and recommended content. This spider symbolism invokes the Japanese myth of the Jorogumo. A Jorogumo is a spider which shapeshifts into a beautiful woman and uses her beauty and music to seduce young men so that she can ensnare them in her web and feed off of them without them realizing that they are being slowly poisoned and eaten alive. Similarly, the digital mother uses the feminine, in particular young women, to attract men into her web by means of various forms of social media and pornography. Young men become pale and weak as they sit motionless in their dark rooms before the screen. The strands of the web shimmer so beautifully and are so hard to detect that they do not realize that they are being eaten alive. Their postures even begin to look like that of a man at the edge of a lake, entranced by a mermaid, head thrust forward as if invisible hands are pulling him into the screen. Staring into the reflective surface of the black mirror also invokes the myth of narcissists who rejected romantic relationships with real women in favor of the self-pleasure of staring at his own reflection. This death stare into the screen, particularly in young children, also resembles the stare of a victim of Medusa. As we sit before our screens, entranced by the beautiful shapes which we see shimmering on the other side, we are slowly being dissolved, losing contact with reality, turning to stone, becoming nothing more than batteries for the Matrix. But if we are all slaves, who exactly are the masters? Who are the spiders which have spun this beautiful web? In Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra, Zarathustra enters a tarantula's lair and speaks of the emerging masterclass of our time. He says, although they are sitting in their holes, these poisonous spiders, their backs turned on life, they speak in favor of life, but only because they wish to hurt. If it were otherwise, the tarantulas would teach otherwise. They themselves were once the foremost slanderers of the world and burners of heretics. Zarathustra speaks of how these tarantulas preach equality, but in their hearts is revenge, and if they could, they would be emperors and kings and rule over the people as slaves. Zarathustra says, "You preachers of equality, your impotence clamors out of you for equality. Your most secret ambitions are to be tyrants, but you shroud them in words of virtue, aggrieved conceit, repressed envy. Perhaps the conceit and envy of your fathers erupts from you as a flame and as a frenzy of revenge." The tarantulas which perch in the web of the internet are the global aristocratic elite, which are rising to power around the world. They are CEOs, billionaires, and politicians. They control what you know and what you think by means of the media, censorship, and information warfare. They profit off of your addictions to the internet, to pharmaceuticals, to unhealthy food. Thus we see that the spirit of the Matrix does not just rule the internet, but is present in all branches of culture, especially those concerning government and politics. She preaches equality and safety, urging you to stay inside, to avoid any dangers, and most of all to be obedient and to follow the official narrative, to self-censor any dissonant thoughts and tear down those who would revolt, because Mother says so. She promises that you can escape your biology and the suffering of the world, that eventually you may be able to even upload your consciousness to the machine and to leave your body behind completely, to escape the prison of biology and of the world. Notice how the most popular ideologies of our time preach escaping the restrictions of biology and of culture. Notice how the field of climate change activism has been almost completely taken over by the idea of a hyper-technological world in which people live in pods, eat food supplements, and restrict birth rates. This is not a return to nature. These doctrines benefit the new ruling class. Historically, the ruling class would make the lower classes work to produce food, to build roads, and to people the armies. But with the advance of technology, the new ruling class has figured out that they can produce the commodity, and the slave can produce wealth merely by consuming. As long as you are alive and able to consume, then you can generate wealth. And what's more, the ruling class is not incentivized to create quality products, but rather medicine, food, and media, which will drug you and keep you weak and ignorant so that you will remain as a dependent consumer. These are the tarantulas which perch above the Great Mother. They have created a web of drugs, surveillance, and entertainment, and you have been snared. Behold the Podman. In his book, The History and Origins of Consciousness, Erich Neumann describes the unconscious stage in the development of consciousness when the son has not yet separated from his mother, and, if he is unable to do so, meets his death as the infantile son-lover who is consumed by his mother. Neumann writes, "It is the stage of complete impotence against the Ouroboros mother and the overwhelming power of fate, as we still find in Greek tragedy, and in particular in the figure of Oedipus. Masculinity and consciousness have not yet won to independence, and the Ouroboros incest has given way to the matriarchal incest of adolescence. The death ecstasy of incest is symptomatic of an adolescent ego not yet strong enough to resist the forces of the Great Mother." This perfectly sums up the psychology of modern man. Collectively, modern man has regressed to the adolescent stage when the masculine ego, the light of consciousness, has not yet emerged. Man is already entering a second womb and is becoming once again a fetus. But there is hope. Man may yet be born again, stronger than before. You are already a Podman, but you may yet be a forefather of the Superman. The digital mother is the shadow of our natural mother, nature. Nature is a savage and beautiful mother. She does not protect and weaken like the digital mother. She does not preach equality and safety. She does not promise salvation from the cruelty of the world and from biology. Nature demands that you adapt to her and rewards you only if you are able to do so. Nature is the mother who rears heroes and gods, the dragon who must be overcome to find the gold. Nietzsche taught a return to health, to the body, and to the worldly, for he believed that we had spent too long with Christianity in the heavens, dreaming of lofty and pure ideals. Thus arose his idea of the Ubermensch, of the Superman, a man who does everything for his own health, for his own well-being, for his own power. The will to power is a will to life and to health, just as a lion, by instinct, does what is healthy for him and what makes him stronger. Thus, Nietzsche believed that we would have to go beyond good and evil, which are the products of civilization, to a new morality based on health, strength, and human striving, rather than the self-sacrifice and repression of the instincts which came with Christianity. Similarly, Carl Jung believed that we would have to reintegrate the instincts and the unconscious, in other words, nature and the mother. He also believed that we would have to psychologically reunite good and evil and let the fallen Lucifer, as a representative of the instincts, back into heaven. This talk of good and evil is at first quite confusing until we realize that during the Christian age, the world, the mother, became synonymous with evil, while the father, the heavens, became the definition of good. Thus, we see that the integration of good and evil is largely the integration of spirit and matter, of culture and nature. of conscious and unconscious. This is the kingdom of God. This is the incarnation. But in order to do this, we must prevail against the digital mother. We slew our father, and we are now in danger of being devoured by a bitter mother. When using technology or medicine, we must always ask, will this make me stronger, healthier? We must ask, will this make me dependent on technology, on the internet, and on big corporations? We must reject the comfort of the digital mother. We must reclaim our bodies. We must reclaim our instincts. We must reclaim our might and will. We must let nature rear us into men. We must erupt from our cocoons, slay the digital mother, and rend her web asunder. We must embody the divine, solar masculinity of heroes, of supermen. Like the setting sun, we have slipped back into the dark waters of the unconscious, back into the womb, but we will rise again in a new dawn, brighter and more triumphant than before, if only we can escape the digital mother.